The old boar wakened towards sunset and climbed into the nest. The 3 young ones were sucking and pushing at their mother with their tiny paws as she lay on her side, relaxed and happy. When she saw the boar, she snarled softly, and when he moved nearer her young, she spat and snapped at him. That night he hunted for food, close to the old tree stump. From time to time he climbed up to the nest and was met with a snarl and a grimace. The young hedgehogs slept, sheltered by their mother's body. At dawn, the boar went to sleep across the cleft, landing into the tree stump. The sow did not stir out of the nest, but from time to time she watched her young, paying particular attention to their eyes and ears, which are liable to attacks from maggots. The faint beginnings of bristles were showing on their backs, and when she turned them over to wash their undersides, they opened their mouths in little soundless cries. All day long she nursed and fed them, and when an evening came, the boar saw that she slept with her paws across their bodies. Early the next morning, while her young were still fast asleep, she crept from the nest to search for food, but she was too anxious to stray far. After she had eaten a few woodlice and a couple of luscious slugs, she felt that she was no longer hungry. While she hunted for an hour or so at dawn and dusk each day, the boar slept across the seal of the nest. By the end of the 4th day, the little hedgehogs had opened their eyes and were able to make faint mewing cries. Their bristles were clearly noticeable. They were rather like the quills left on a badly plucked chicken, and of the same greyish-white colour. By the end of a week, they had their full complement of soft grey-white bristles, and their bodies had darkened a little. Their snouts were still not fully developed, but they could see, and they could crawl around in the nest. Their mother still washed and suckled them. On the young hedgehog's 10th day, a cat appeared in the hedge. It was an old tabby cat which belonged to Amelia Dart, and it crawled along the branch above the hedgehog's nest. The sow became very agitated, and eventually her snuffling and spitting awoke the boar. Both the adult hedgehogs threatened the cat repeatedly, but it remained crouched on the bough over their heads, and there was little they could do. As soon as dusk fell, the sow prepared a new nest at the top end of an overgrown garden some 50 yards further down the land. She carried her young to it one by one, holding them carefully in her mouth. Grasped by the tough skin at the base of their necks, she made sure that her sharp teeth did not penetrate their hide. The boar went out as usual for his evening's hunting, but the sow was still too worried to leave her babies and seek her own food. The young hedgehogs spent their waking hours exploring their new home. The bristles were beginning to darken from root upwards. They were now half grey and half white. Woolly hairs were growing on their stomachs, and their snouts and tails were developing rapidly. Their faces and claws had darkened to a greyish-brown. Quill was larger than the other two, and Mattie had on her side a patch of bristles which had been damaged when her mother was carrying her to the new nest. These bristles remained short and white and looked like a scar on her flank, although they darkened and grew longer in later life. It was always easy to recognise Mattie by this patch of white-tipped bristles. The third youngster was a nondescript little urchin called Spiky. As her young grew, the mother was less determined in her efforts to keep the boar from the nest, and when she was hunting one evening, he climbed in. The youngsters awakened immediately, and Quill ran towards him, his nostrils working, to find out what this strange creature was. Quill recognised the hedgehog's scent, which was much ranker than that of his mother, but he was amazed by the size of this strange animal, with his big buff face with black bands running down each side of the snout. The boar sniffed at Quill and at each of the youngsters in turn. They snuffled out of the nest. The babies were excited, but quite unafraid. When the mother returned, she realised that her mate had been in the nest, and she washed her babes with great care to see that they were unharmed. After that, the boar often climbed into the nest, and she cared about it less and less. At the end of the 3rd week, she started to bring her young little delicacies, which she returned from hunting with. At first, they did not know what to do with the slugs and snails which she laid before them. They tried to play with them, but she soon taught them that such things were good to eat. The youngsters' bristles were now grey, darkening to brown at the base, and white-tipped. The great muscle in their backs, which would later control the erection of their bristles, had thickened and set. But the tendons were still too weak to allow the little hedgehogs to do more than curl themselves into a prickly semicircle. Their faces were covered with coarse prickly hair, and their snouts and feet were black. Their short front legs were covered with thick, furry black hair, and their back legs, which were longer and ended in little claws, were only sparsely covered. They kept their tails tucked under them. From head to tail they were now about 2.5 inches in length. During their 4th week of life, they lived on a mixed diet of slugs, snails, centipedes, woodlice and other small creatures which their mother brought to them. She still suckled them at intervals and would continue to do so until the end of their 5th or 6th week. But her milk was already beginning to dry up. And there she is, look, going back inside of her little nest to be with her babies. Exciting. I wonder what's going to happen next.